Welcome everyone to our February Assessment Directors meeting. If you're out on the online world, it looks like we do have quite a few people joining our review Kahoot. This tool, hopefully you enjoyed it. It's a fun way for us just to check understanding and the things we need to refocus on where there's misperceptions or confusions that might exist out in the field. So if you take a minute and get into the Kahoot, we will get started right away. As a reminder, at 10:30 when this meeting comes to an end, we have the Center for Assessment. We'll be here to do a training on our using local assessments to measure growth. That's an issue that was requested previously by various assessment directors. That'll happen here in this room. For those of you who want to stay for that, there have been some questions come in this morning about whether that would be broadcast through WebEx, and we will. We originally hadn't intended to do that, but Emily's able to stay with us, and we'll do that. So those of you who are out in the virtual world, you can just stay with us if you want to. Oh yeah, another reminder that we need to, if you're in the field, keep your computer muted. It's disruptive across the system if we're not. Okay, Emily, can you switch us back to the PowerPoint? We'll come back to this slide and to the Kahoot in just a minute. I always like to start with a thought. Eric Weimeyer, any of you are familiar with him, he's the only legally blind person to summit Mount Everest. And if you get online and search on him, you'll find lots of stuff about him. But one of the quotes that he gave that I really find value in, especially when I worked in the schools, is just a reminder for me that everyone has a yearning for greatness. We don't always see that come out in ourselves. And sometimes people we either work with or students that we serve, it looks like maybe they don't. But I truly believe this deep down inside, everyone has a yearning for greatness. And that tapping into that is one of the things that can help us really bring about improvement in ourselves personally, in our work environments, and in our schools. So, no, but let's go back to the Kahoot, and we'll go through our review quiz. Okay, so we'll give you just a minute. Again, if you haven't gotten in yet, just go to kahoot.it. You'll get that PIN number. And I think we have about 10 questions that I've created during last month's meeting that I thought maybe would provide some confusion if we didn't review it. So, all right, Emily, let's go. I'm going to step over to the side. If a test condition is coded as test copy match, how long will it take for the student to get a score? We talked about this briefly during our last meeting. Up to 5 days was the correct answer. Clearly this level of detail wasn't something that we attended to that much, but just a reminder, as we start to administer tests, you might have questions come from the field saying, why didn't my student get a score instantaneously? This is one of the possible reasons for that. Okay, Emily, let's go to our next question. Our Grinch is back. Benchmark and interim assessments will continue to be available in grades 3 through 8 in the 18-19 school year. This has been a question across the state as we're in schools and districts that I think lots of our teachers find value, especially in the benchmarks, and the answer to that is yes. That our contract with Questar includes those items, and so you'll continue to see benchmark and interim tests. The timeline for that, we'll give you a detailed timeline of implementation at our next month's meeting, but I can tell you right now the benchmarks should be available by October 1st, and the interim and summatives will be available by November 1st of next year. All right, let's go on. How do I prepare my students for the ACT writing test? This was discussed briefly by Rebecca. It's a good tool that's available for your teachers. Download the online prompts and have them practice that ACT provides. Is that correct, Rebecca? And Utah Compose. They're both tools that can help. Okay, Emily, let's go on. The new report card will include which new data point? So we're designing a new report card. It's been over a year in the working, and it'll be available this coming fall. Which new data point will be there? Wonderful. 10 of you got that right. Self-reported indicators, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of this meeting as we'll get some feedback from you about what kind of indicators you'd like to see. That information has also been gathered from the Utah School Boards Association. All right, Emily, go on. The new accountability system places an increased weighting on which of the following? There's more points in the school grade calculation in one of these categories than there was previously. Growth, wonderful. That's true at the elementary and the secondary level. Growth is factored more heavily. All right, thank you, Emily. Will a letter grade be included on the school report cards in the fall of 2018? This is me questioning what the perception is out in the field. So there's a little more leaning towards the belief that yes, there'll be a letter grade. There are some of you, though, that believe that won't be true. The reason that that question's on there is last year the legislature passed a rule, or a law that allows the State Board of Education, whenever an assessment system changes, to not publish a grade because of the challenges that comes with that. We're still a year away from the impacts of changing our assessment systems. So this fall's data will be using the current SAGE and current rules, or current assessment systems. So there's some question within the leadership of the State Board of Education whether to try to implement that rule and not issue letter grades this year, or whether to delay that and the next year not issue letter grades. So I'll take this feedback and provide it to the superintendency for their information, and then we'll keep you posted regarding the decisions that are made there. Okay, Emily? The spring summative assessment window opens on which day? March 20th. You can see there's some misperceptions that exist out there, but March 20th is the day that that spring window opens. I don't know how many of your LEAs are planning on beginning administration at the beginning of that window. I know in Box Elder we tried to back our testing up towards the end of it as much as possible, but you can start testing on March 20th. The Chrome OS 59 is compatible with the AIR test delivery system. This is one I heard last month that I thought was probably important to attend to. It is not. So you'll want to make sure on your devices, typically your Chrome OS is updated automatically, but if you have problems with testing or if your IT staff wants to test that before you open your testing window, make sure you have versions newer than that. Science practice clusters are available for grades 6th, 7th, and 8th grade currently. Yes, they are. Scott, you did a great job of communicating that last month. Awesome. And Scott will talk more about this later in our presentation. But okay, Emily. How many writing prompts will students in grades 3 through 8 and 11 have to respond to in spring of 2018? Wonderful. 100% on that one. That one's actually caused some confusion with the changes in writing. When you throw in the ACT, adding writing, 9th and 10th grade removing writing, 9th and 10th grade still having writing available in the fall window. So we have been concerned about that. It's wonderful that that's clear to everyone who's here. Okay. Podium tester. That seems fitting that tester would win the Poll Anywhere quiz. Are there any questions that have come up from that? Any of you that were listening or participating in that caused you to question, Kim? Oh, The question online is, can I send out the this quiz with the correct answers? I can publish it, and then you can go search it. I don't think I've done that. So Kahoot has, you can publish all of your Kahoots, and then people can find them. I could do that, and then in our next AD memo, I'll give the name of that, so you don't have to search all over. You'll be able to just find it. Okay, and then the correct answers come up when you take that again. So, okay. All right, thanks, Emily. Can you get us back to PowerPoint? So my few slides that I'm going to go over are basically just updating you about the happenings in the assessment world, and then I'll turn the time over to the assessment staff who will get into the details and the things that hopefully add value to your day-to-day work. If I get this to work. Yeah, I turned the side button on. It might not. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's go through some general updates. Last month when we met, we talked about this amendment that the State Board of Education made to 277404. And I had agreed to create a document because there are lots of questions come up with this because it has some conflicting components to it, to some of our state code that prohibits the use of statewide assessment data on a student's grade. I created that document, was prepared to send it out, send it to the board, and it's been quarantined. I don't know if that's the right word. And they're going to review it with board leadership on February 27th. After that point, one of a couple things could happen. They could give it to me and say, go ahead and send it out. It represents the intent of the board. Or they could modify it and have me make changes to that and send it out. Or they could go into the abyss and not have anything to give you. So I'll keep you posted. I expect on February 28th I'll be able to give you some information about that. 6th through 8th grade science data, because we're in an operational field test this year, we will not be able to obtain scores for that until we get through the full process, which will be in October. So as you think about that, that creates a couple of challenges. One is the students, when they complete the test, they're not getting a score, right? And we've gotten good in Utah at providing that, and our users have gotten used to being able to see their score when they hit submit. So preparing students for that is one element. The other element is when we start talking about school accountability, the science scores for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are important for all the schools that have 6th, 7th, or 8th grade in it. So there's discussion right now about whether to delay the school accountability reports until we can have all the data. I personally believe that's less confusing to the field. We have, I think, 21 different school configurations across the state with grade configurations. And once you start releasing accountability data for some schools and not others, people start asking questions, and it's hard to communicate why that's the case. And so this is actually something we'll be talking about at APAC later this afternoon, and I hope to have a decision out to the field certainly before we meet again in March. And then if any of you participated online in the state school board meeting earlier this month, they had a discussion about the 95% participation requirement of ESSA. We've been directed to complete a waiver request and submit that to the federal government. That waiver request will be up for public comment over the next 2 weeks. I expect that to show up on our state website, and there'll be a place for community members to submit comment or public input. I'll take that public input and put it and incorporate it into the draft. We'll submit that to the federal government. And then the process, which I don't know how long it will take, will begin with them considering it and either rejecting that waiver request or granting it. So just so you know, that's something that's ongoing. What that would impact is how school grades are calculated. If the waiver were granted, then students who are not tested, we would not include them in the denominator, whereas the 95% participation rule requires that if a school has less than 95% participation, those students below that threshold are counted as non-proficient, even though we know they're unknown, their status of learning and growth. So that doesn't impact you day-to-day, but in terms of the big picture and the challenges you face with opt-outs, and that's something that could be very impactful. Questar contract was approved last February. That was 14 months. Just so you know, that took 14 months from the time they started writing the RFP to publishing that, collecting it, scoring it, working out the contract. And so that's really big, really good news for those of us in assessment, because without that contract signed, it delays our implementation, and we're already in a window that feels pretty uncomfortable to being able to deliver everything that we need to. So that's a celebration. The 910 assessment RFP process is ongoing. I expect within the scoring committee has met several times, presentations have been done, and I expect the decision that they make will be made public within the next 2 weeks. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Along with that, we have started a communications rebranding plan with SAGE. Previously, SAGE was administered to grades 3 through 11. Now SAGE will be 3 through 8. It'll also be the system that they take the assessment in will be a different vendor. So we're in the process of working with our public relations people here at the State Board, as well as a private company, BWP, marketing company, to rebrand and to create a communication strategy. And I'll have a question for you, and I'll give you a chance to give us input about what materials are most useful for you to help communicate and be clear about what the change means and what it doesn't mean. And we'll do that here shortly. So why a communications plan? This actually caused some discussion at our most recent board meeting. In January, they voted to approve the money that I requested to use for this as a full board. But some individual board members had questions about this at our last meeting. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this. This is important to understand in the field based on the concerns that some board members presented. So the look of the product is changing, which generally in the industry that causes a need for you to rebrand and maybe even rename a product. We need to provide clarity around what the new tests will look like, including the concept that the test items, the Utah test items that we've been using in SAGE 3 through 8, those are still our items. We own those, and we'll use those with the new delivery system, which means the data associated with that longitudinally is still valuable to us. How the interim and benchmarks are still available and the purpose for those assessments, and how they are productivity tools rather than a summative assessment. And then again, just really stressing that the rebranding isn't an attempt to manipulate anybody's thinking. It's simply an effort to provide clarity to the field. So these are the elements of our communications plan, and we've had a kickoff meeting with this company, and another meeting will be on Friday of this week, and some of you have received email communications from me that you might be contacted by them to get feedback about this process. So they'll go through a rebranding, then brand development. This collateral question is where I want to ask for your help. We've talked about flyers, brochures, handouts. We'll have social media campaign and then some video that will go along with that to promote this assessment system in grades 3 through 8 and the value that it possesses to teachers, students, and parents. Emily, can you switch to the poll everywhere slide? So the question is, I've worked with this company, is what kind of collateral is most valuable to the field? So I'm going to pull up a poll everywhere website, and it's going to give you a chance to join this poll, both those of you who are out in the virtual world, or our virtual world anyway, your real world, and those of you who are face-to-face. And I want you to take just a moment to think about that. Some of you were involved in assessment when the state adopted the language, arts, and math standards, and we also incorporated the Student Assessment for Growth and Excellence, or SAGE, when that name was created and sent out through the community. Okay, so if you go full screen, down here the 4 arrows, Emily, right there, that should activate the poll. And you can join this poll either by text or through the internet. So the number on text would be 37607, and then you just put my name and that number in the text message. Or if you'd rather do it on the internet, just do the poll, eve.com / into your browser. That'll pull you in, and then we'll see what people are putting up here. But again, the question is, what kind of collateral is most valuable to you as assessment directors in the field for communicating about this change with grades 3 through 8 in our effort to rebrand and to clearly articulate the value of the assessment system? we'll collect these, and I'll share this with our company that we're working with, as well as Emily Wheeler and Mark Peterson. So we'll take a minute. Any of you who are in this room, if you get to this point and are having errors with that, let me know. It usually works pretty smoothly, though. Okay. Looks like we're getting some people in. Even if, and if you want to be clear about, so we've got flyers and brochures, but there might be types of information in those flyers that you want us to include. One of my purposes with this is to really focus on communicating directly with the teacher population. I believe they're the primary communicator about these with students and also parents. And again, those of you who've been involved in some of these types of changes in the past, there were things that added real value to you that would be good for us to know. And we'll take that into account as we work with this company. Okay, looks like we're getting some good feedback. Again, I challenge you to think about even some specific information there. We'll leave this active, Emily. We'll go back to our PowerPoint, but we'll leave this active and people can continue to input information into that. I think we were on, was it 6? 7. Let's go to 7 is where we just left off. Okay, so those are some of the big things that have been going on at the State Board of Education in relationship to assessment. Again, we have our APAC meeting this afternoon where we'll get some guidance about some decisions that have to be made related to our Questar contract. And we'll continue to try to keep you as updated as possible as we move forward with this program. So I'm going to turn the time over to Rebecca, who's going to review ACT, which we're just a couple weeks away from that big day, and hopefully be able to answer any questions you have with that.
Okay, we are just a couple of weeks away, as in 2 weeks and 4 days, I think. So, am I going the wrong way? The right way. There we go. So we're going to talk about some dates and deadlines, final prep reminders, and an upcoming training that is actually this afternoon. And I included this little comic on here of the kangaroo because once we get to this particular point in the year with assessments coming, sometimes this is what it feels like. So it's a kangaroo, it's covered in bandages, poor guy, and he's using a pogo stick. And the caption says, well, if I'm lucky, I should be able to get off this thing in 6 more weeks. So by now, the important things are the administration supplement should have been printed off to be given out along with the administration manual, because that's the item that has the instructions that tell students to skip the 2 questions that we want them to skip, the questions 59 and 62 that have to do with income and religious affiliation. People should have had their test day schedules set up, proctor trainings, and things like that planned. And you should have informed your parents, your students, and other people at the schools so that anybody who needs to know what's going on that day knows, and it's not a surprise. Upcoming deadlines. So these are things that are coming up, and they're coming up pretty quickly. You'll notice this first one is February 20th. So that's next week. Make sure that if you're testing online, that the tech coordinator is prepared to lock down the system, so changes cannot be made after the 20th. By the 21st, anybody that is going to be added in to test for the testing window that starts on the 27th, that has to be done by the 21st. If you want to order additional materials, that needs to be done by the 21st. After that deadline, students, if you're testing on paper, they'll have to be pushed to the March 20th testing date. So the 21st is the big deadline that's coming up. And then by the 26th, this is where if you're testing paper, you need to have all of your pre-test information completed. If you're testing online, there's a larger window because testing online has a window, but it needs to be completed 4 days, by 4 days after you're completed with your testing if you're doing online. So, and we verified that that is for school days or business days, not for calendar days. Okay. The question is, do students need to finish every question on the pretest booklet? The answer to that is no. However, there are the first sections of questions on the initial, where they put their name, their birth date, their address. I believe it's through block K that does need to be completed. One question that does come up is block S, which has a place where you can put a school or district student ID number. That is something that you can choose to put in if it is useful. As the state, we don't use block S for our information. Any other questions on that one? Okay, next thing, all of item 5. This is the step that goes through and talks about administering the ACT. Has all of the detailed manuals, all of the information for making the ACT actually happen. And then you have the big day, the 27th. So this is the paper administration day, and it's the opening of the online testing window. So it's coming up very soon. So since we skipped it last time, we have a Name That Tune. And the theme this time is 70s. And my computer went to sleep. Okay, so we're looking for song title, artist, and the theme connection. So here we go. Let me make sure my volume is up.
Yeah, only just begun.
Okay, thematic connection. We've only just begun the ACT. Very good. That was the thematic connection. The honor, the glory. Okay, final preparations, lonely accommodations. We have some items where we've got accommodations that have not been matched. So students have had accommodations applied for, but when they're not getting matched into Pearson Access Next to an actual student. So what we need is for everybody to make sure that you run your TAA PIN report and make sure that your enrollment is accurate within Pearson Access Next, that all of your students are actually in there, so that if there are students who have accommodations that have been approved, they can be matched within Pearson Access Next. Because if your students are not listed in Pearson Access Next, they cannot be matched to the accommodations that were approved for them. If you need to know how to run that PIN report, you can find it on page 17 of the user guide. If you need to know how to enroll students, that's on page 11 of the user guide. If you have questions about ACT accommodations, the best place to call is the ACT Accommodations Help Desk. And you can find this phone number that's up here also on our Utah ACT website, and it's up in the little gray box that's on the corner. So we have another one. Okay, here we go.
One way or another, I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna get you one way or another.
Who is it? Blondie, what's the name of it? One way or another, okay? Thematic connection. Think about what we just talked about. Okay, what we just talked about, what was missing? Yes, we want to connect the accommodations with the people. Good. I know. Okay, other questions if you're testing students from another school? This has come up. You need to make sure in box K that those students put their own school ID number. So for example, if I'm testing a student from a virtual school at my brick and mortar school, you need to make sure that they put their virtual school ID number in box K. Mhm. Yes, so the question was if we order additional materials, do we return them with everybody else? The answer to that is yes. So you'll return all of your materials. Anything that you receive, you send back to ACT with your return shipments. Okay, if you need to find your any school ID number, so say you have somebody that's testing at your school, they don't know their school code, you're not sure what it is, you can look up any high school code using the high school search that is on ACT's website. And if you just type in ACT high school code search, it'll pull up that tool that you can use. If you have homeschooled students, the code that you'll enter in is 969999, which is also on that search page. Another thing to consider is that your students that are coming from another place, or if they're going to another place, they're going to need to have a picture ID because you won't be able to identify them as a known student, which is one of the ways that you can identify students who are at your school if they're known to the people there. So, and that needs to be laminated. So it can't be a piece of paper that's printed out. It needs to be like a hard laminated student ID card or a driver's license. Upcoming trainings. Yes, question. Okay, question is what happens if students complete 59 and 62, aka they didn't follow directions. Students don't do that, right? So if they didn't do that, if they completed those, do we erase them? The answer to that is no, because we're going to mask those data anyway. So just leave it. But we're requesting that they don't do that. That's what we need to do to fulfill our obligation. Okay, question is about how does the makeup test work for March 20th? The answer I'm going to give is come to this. This is the training that is this afternoon, and we'll go over questions and answers like that. The detailed instructions for how to do that, if you go to the schedule of events that's on the ACT website, there are the dates for when those things need to happen, and within the testing administration manual, there are detailed instructions for how to make those things happen. But in a nutshell, yes, those students will test on March 20th. Okay, so there's a training today that is designed to answer questions that people have. And it's a virtual training, so you don't have to hang out all here all day unless you really want to. Okay. Last one. This table over here, by the way, is dominating. So we need to spread the wealth a little bit. Well, maybe, or you guys can continue to dominate. And online, you guys have lots of opportunity here. Okay, so last one. Okay, Anybody? Okay. Oh, they got it again. Jackson 5, song is ABC. What's the thematic connection? Yes. It's a multiple choice test for most of it. Actually, for the ACT it is. So make sure that you're marking your multiple choice answers. Okay, that was our thematic connection. You guys are brilliant. Way to go. If you have questions or suggestions, please feel free to email me. My email address is rebecca.peterson@schools.utah.gov. And with that, we'll turn it over to next person, unless there's any remaining burning questions. Okay. Scott, you are up.
Okay, I sent this information out on the AD memo this week also, but I wanted to go through it, and if there's any questions, at least I could be here to find out. Get those questions at least open and figure out which button does which on this. Okay. This is only for the new seed science standards, so grades 6, 7, and 8. Nothing has changed for the element 4th and 5th grade or for high school. It's still the same test as before. No new development, no new changes on it. It should go through just fine. This is for all stakeholders, so don't hog this information, assessment directors. Share it with people at the LEA. Share it with your principals, your leadership, with your teachers. Get this information out because I get a lot of questions back and find myself answering a lot of the same redundant questions. Things like, I heard that there's not going to be a test. Today, the test will be locked. Today, it's ready to go, okay? There is going to be a test. I've been working hard to get her done, but we're there. So we're calling this a baseline collection year. If you remember the first year SAGE happened, we did not give out scores right away, right? And so we're collecting this data from the first time in this operational field test, and it's got to go through several other workshops before we can give out a final result. Otherwise, we're giving out false information, and we would be rightfully accused of lying to the field. And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that our information is accurate, that it's reliable and valid. So there are no anticipated or predicted results, but if you remember the first time SAGE came out, scores took a dip. It would not be out of the ordinary to see scores drop on this new test when it first comes out. But we should not be drawing conclusions based on last year's results to this year's results in terms of what that actually means. Okay, so just be careful with that because we don't want to be sending out a false message that students somehow or another with these new standards got worse. It's a baseline year. New standards, teachers are still coming up to speed. I had a lot of concerns at the Utah Science Teacher Association conference this year from teachers worried about how we're going to be looking at those scores, how closely we're going to be looking at them. I remember in my classroom and myself and my colleagues developed a new 8th grade curriculum. It took us 3 years to get that curriculum developed. And I expect that for seasoned teachers, it's going to take 3 years, up to 5 years for new teachers to get used to these new standards and this new way of teaching. And so just be aware of that. We, at least in my position, I recognize that it's going to take time, and that's okay. It's a new thing. Yeah, question online. How the growth, I don't know how it will adjust. I can't answer that question yet. People have been asking me, how can you possibly calculate growth or proficiency? I like to use golf as an analogy. I play golf. I like to shoot Mulligan's executive course because it's easy. I have a horrible handicap. If I go to Pebble Beach, you can take my handicap and make a pretty reasonable prediction on how I'm going to do at Pebble Beach because we know how difficult that course is compared to Mulligan's. Same thing when these kids finally take this new test. We'll get that data back from there, including data on how difficult the questions themselves are, and we'll calculate the growth. Don't know what that's going to look like yet. Okay, so the formatting time, this is designed to take the same amount of time as previous years. We know from messaging from all around the field, and even for myself being a classroom teacher, I don't want to spend more time, extra time on testing. And so if you remember, we've talked about how this is a matrix test. Students will not see questions from every standard, but they will see at least 2 clusters from every strand, which means they'll see about 10 clusters. And we've designed these to take about 10 minutes apiece, so we're looking at about 100 minutes of planned testing time Yes. Sure. Yeah, we're lucky we have Scott Marion here today to for the stuff afterwards. So we'll have him address the growth question.
Hi. Thanks, Scott. So Scott's analogy was pretty close to. It was actually it was a good analogy. And the beauty is that in Utah we use the student growth percentile approach, which is scale agnostic. So as long as the two tests are correlated, which I will bet anything that they're going to be pretty highly correlated, the results, kids who tend to do better will continue to do better, so that we will be able to use student growth percentiles, which essentially would say, I did this well on the new assessment relative to where I started and compared to the group of kids who started in the same place I did on last year's 5th grade assessment for the 6th graders. So student growth percentiles will handle that pretty nicely, as long as the tests are correlated. We think they will be, right?
We've been working very hard on that, including working very hard to make sure that the test is correlated and matches our standards. And so we have very specific standards, and that's why we do all the content reviews and everything else to make sure this all works together. Remember, we do have the practice clusters on the Sage portal. I still have teachers telling me they haven't heard of those, and I don't personally have every one of their emails, so I can't send them that information. And we also have the practice clusters at this link where they can at least get in and the samples and look at these samples of other clusters that are out there and available that are the same format as our questions, that can still give the students and the teachers a score back to show how well they've answered the questions and what specifically we're looking at in scoring these new questions. And so we give trying to give as much information to the field as we possibly can without teaching to the test. It's advisable right now to spread your testing time out. Just because it is a new test, we do want to mitigate possible test fatigue, especially for 6th grade, where they may not have had as much access to this. And so remember, we don't have a time limit in Utah on our test. And so if the kids see a couple clusters and log out, great. Have them see a couple clusters the next day, and that'd be just fine. There's really no big rush. We've also had feedback from parents about how they like it when it's on a bigger screen size. Do remember, if you don't have access to a bigger screen, it's okay. We undergo device platform reviews to make sure it works on iPads, Chromebooks, laptops, and desktop computers. And so it should work on all of those, just not with the new Chrome 59, the old Chrome 59 system. Don't make sure you're off of that one. And so that should be okay with that. So scoring and accountability, I can't say this loud enough. Students will not see a score. And I get a lot of teachers ask me why, because we don't know what the score really is until we get through data review and rubric validation. Once we get through those, then we'll have a good idea of what the score is. But I'm not going to lie to a kid and tell them they did better than they did or tell them they did worse than they did. We just don't know. And so that wouldn't be fair to the field. It wouldn't be fair to that. But once all these reviews are done, and once I've reported this result to the school board, then we will be releasing all this information to the field. And once that's all completed. We hope it's October. I remember when we got the first Sage results, it was around October, November. Someone had mistakenly told our school we'd see them as soon as August. We didn't. We were, why not? Why not? Well, this stuff still has to happen. And so once it's done, then like Scott Marion said, we'll be able to compute growth scores and deliver those with the results also. Question? Sure. So for clarification on the cluster and class testing time, remember, once they've seen the questions, if they log out, they're not going to see them come back again, right? They need to finish that question before they log out. And so have them see 2 clusters and then stop, and that's fine. But once they've seen that cluster, if they did not answer those questions, then there could be a problem that would affect their score negatively because they would not have answered those and it would have gone through as wrong answers. So you can take your time on it, you can pace yourself on it, but once that question comes up on the screen, they do need to answer that if they're going to get a score on it. We don't want to have them see a question, go home overnight, look it up online, come back and get the same question. And so you can pace it, but you do have to be careful with that in terms of when they log out, when they finish. And so I figure teachers more than anything else you know your students. And if you know that they've had access to the sample clusters, that you've been teaching three-dimensionally, we've designed these clusters to assess all three dimensions in science. And our belief is that if the teachers are teaching three-dimensionally, the students will recognize the terminology we use on the test because it's the same terminology from the standards. It's the same terminology from the three dimensions of science, and they should feel very comfortable with the clusters. Question in the field. With the sample test, will students see a score? They can. Once they answer the questions, there's 3 little bars at the top right of the screen. We call it the pancake stack. If you click on that, you can also turn on text-to-speech. And there's after they've answered the questions, they can click a thing that says score item, and it'll bring up all of the scoring assertions and tell them if they got it right or wrong. And so the teachers can even project that on the screen, have the class answer collectively, come to a consensus on what they think the answers are, and the teacher can then discuss the scoring assertions openly with the students. We've even had some schools talk about using this at parent-teacher conference. I mean, imagine parents coming in and having their own students show them the clusters and what they look like and what they can do. We want to be out as open as these as possible, and they are public. And so it's okay to publish them, send links out. Any other questions? Can you elaborate on how growth scores will be calculated and how they will be reliable if the tests are not related? I personally can't elaborate very well on that. It's outside my bailiwick in terms of what we're doing. But we still have Scott Marion here who's coming up and going to answer that question for us. Well, I feel like I have a ringer in the house. This is awesome.
We'll use this as an advertisement. We're doing a little seminar on growth following this meeting, so we could go into more detail. So student growth percentiles simply condition the current score based on previous scores. In other words, it's saying for all the kids, let's go from 5th to 6th grade, for all the kids who last year scored X in 5th grade, we're considering that a group of academic peers. And then how did they score on this new assessment in 6th grade? And so is it as good as using the same exact assessment? No, but we've seen it work quite well. We've done it, for instance, doing it from courses, end of courses from algebra to geometry and things like that. It works quite well. And honestly, because things like even reading and writing, reading and math are so highly correlated in schools, you could actually do it from reading to math. Now, I'm not suggesting that because it's the interpretation is hard, but in the case of science, we're basically saying, how did a group of kids do in science in 5th grade or 4th grade, and then how are they doing on this new test in 2018? So they're being compared relative to what we call their academic peers. Bless you. It'll be probably a little less reliable than the current going from same test to same test, but the difference will be negligible. And we could actually, and that's an empirical statement, we could actually look at those data once the student growth percentiles are produced by Randy and his crew here, along with some of my colleagues. So you'll have that data to see exactly how reliable it is and how well the model fits the data in this case. It looks like Robert has a question here.
Yeah, could you talk about the plan for whatever is our end of level assessment, 10th grade and ACT?
I would assume it would be, we don't know what that is yet because as Darren said, the procurement is still open. But whatever that is, the same thing, Robert, as long as the scores correlate. Now, you need data, right? And so we have to wait until that's done, and we have to get kids 2 years in a row.
Will it present much of a statistical problem that the ACT has a 30-point scale?
You've been studying. So Robert asked if will it present much of a statistical problem that the ACT has a 36-point scale. The ACT does have a sort of a compressed scale. the bigger issue for us in calculating SGPs is whether or not there are ceiling or floor effects. Do you get a bunch of kids bumping up against 36? Do you get a bunch of kids bumping up against 1? And you guys know from looking at the ACT distributions, that's not the case. Where the challenge a little bit on the ACT is that a lot of the test information is clustered, let's say, between like 17 and 30 or 32, right? So it will be a little less efficacious calculating growth on something like the ACT for the very highest performing kids or the very lowest performing kids, but for the 98% in the middle, it'll likely be fine. Any more growth questions before I sit down? And Michelle looks like she has a question.
I don't know that we're going to include growth between the 10th grade assessment to ACT. So that's likely not going to be included in the growth indicator.
The more important question, of course, right? Are you going to do it? You give us numbers, we'll do anything. You know, that's Kim has. Oh, so I'm going to defer to Darren because I don't want to screw it. But this is a great advertisement for when are we starting 10:30 for the. There we go.
So at 10:30, pay attention to more information on student growth percentages. Awesome. Very cool. So, wake up. There we go. I'm at the end of my little spiel. Remember, this information is on the AD memo. Copy and paste it. Send it out just anywhere. It's okay. Any questions about the test, contact me. Any questions about accountability, and Michelle's your contact. And any other questions before I leave and turn the time over to someone else? Okay, you got my email, so write me. It's okay. So we're going to turn the time over to Megan.
Thank you. All right. Good morning. So hopefully this information is familiar because we've been trying to send this out frequently in the AD memos. Just as a reminder, the testing window for WIDA ends on March 9th. Okay, so that is coming up pretty soon. And also, I'm sorry I don't have the date up there, but if you need any additional materials, and that includes district level labels, you do need to contact Ann Michelle or myself for those labels. And that window closes on the 2nd, okay? Also, WIDA is very highly encouraging you to get those writing booklets returned as soon as possible so they can start scoring them. And this is more for your tech people. There are system updates that have taken place, and the link is included. So for any updated specifications, go there for system updates. Let's see. We have a flyer. It was attached in a memo, but also we have some paper copies if you would like to take some. WIDA is recruiting teachers in schools that are giving the WIDA assessment, especially the writing. They're doing a writing tryout, and if you participate, your school will get $100 for supplies, so that's definitely a bonus. And basically, they want to verify to make sure that scoring of the writing is good, right? So it's validation. So if you have any questions, there is a letter with more information, and hopefully you've had a chance to look it over prior to today. And Utah is going to be applying to do an e-learning pilot. Only 5 states in the country are going to actually have this opportunity, so we have to apply. And in order for us to apply, we want to get a lot of feedback from the field about whether or not this is viable, and it will also help back us up in our application. So if you can, there's a link to the survey. We want as much information as possible about what kind of platforms you have for technology and e-learning for teachers. If we can do this pilot, it would be a really fantastic opportunity for teachers and educators. in the EL education community to get additional support from WIDA. So please give us your feedback. And we're really pushing this new professional development opportunity for EL educators. And we have another flyer as well. Hopefully you have gotten this attachment in prior AD memos. And this is actually a newer professional development opportunity being presented by WIDA. They've completely revamped this training. It is a 2-day training and it's an action research workshop for educators. Space is limited, so that we can only have 45 participants, so we strongly encourage you to get the message out there because it's first come, first serve. And it will be held on March 8th and April 18th, and you register through Midas, and the code is also on the worksheet, and then just more information about that workshop as well. So we will leave the handouts by the sign-in sheet where you came in, and then I'm going to hand it over.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about, oh, Kim has a question. Okay. I'd say more than one person per district would be fine. We're really looking for information about what type, what's viable and possible within the district, but also like what's best. Exclusively self-directed online learning versus a blended type of learning. What kind of e-learning works best for you? So I think various perspectives are fine. ALS directors can respond as well as you, as well as school principals. The more information, the better. I just want to pipe in about how excited I am about this action research workshop. If you've ever engaged in action research, I think it's really an effective process. Originally, this was called a data workshop. They were going to go through how to deconstruct WIDA data to improve instruction. They changed the name of it because they found that the process they wanted to use to do that was action research. So teachers will come on March 8th. They'll make a plan. They'll collaborate with people around content if they want to focus on math or science and supporting ELs in a content area. So they'll get to collaborate across with other schools, et cetera. Then they have 6 weeks to go back and do implementation work, come back to a second training mid-April, and evaluate what happened and start the action research cycle again. So as we know about research and professional development, this is a really great opportunity for teachers to really implement good practice in instruction for ELs.
And
I think that's all.
yeah. Does anyone want me to hand you them right here?
Not the most recent, but the 2 before should have them. These handouts that are going out were not in the last AD memo, but the 2 previous AD memos both had these attachments.
Okay, I just have a quick KEEP update. We were able to go out and do some field testing, tweak the KEEP exit based on the feedback from teachers and districts and LEAs, and also the experience with working with the assessment with students. And we're in the process of finalizing that document to be sent to the printers. And we should have the final draft out in the next few weeks. So now it's time to sign up for trainings. This time around, because the format is similar to the KEEP entrance, there will just be a train the trainer model. And USB will be offering 3 different dates for that to occur. So March 13th from 2:30 to 4:30, it's a face-to-face training, and there is a limited number of space because it's in Basement West, so limited to 100 participants. Same with March 15th, it's from 2 to 4, and same amount of participants. And then we also have a March 19th option from 10 to 12, which will be broadcasted by webinar and be recorded and put on USBE's YouTube channel, so that this could be something that you disseminate to teachers. Could be something that LEAs use to train teachers at the LEA level. This is the link that you will need to use, which will come to you in the PowerPoint, and the course number to be able to register. And we're assuming it will take about 2 hours or less, and because of limited space, we would ask that you be very particular about who you send and very strategic in who you choose to come to that. Even though the format is similar, the items are substantially different because they are aligned to 2 different sets of core. Preschool standards at the entrance, kindergarten standards now at the end of the year. And that's all I got. Any questions? Yes?
This is for Darren. I'm going to go on a little bit of a diatribe right here. Yeah. All right. I got a stage. Okay. When we were talking about at the beginning of the year, like what this would look like at the spring in terms of, you know, how much time is spent on it and the cost. And I think other districts would agree that we have an enormous cost that have been absorbed by the school districts on this. So we figured, Robin and I figured out yesterday to give the final assessment by a certified teacher, and we're keeping our kindergartners in class. We're not letting them out for instructional reasons and also PR for parents. That's costing us roughly $35,000 this spring just to do that. I mean, is this something we're going to continue to do and absorb the costs for every district on this? This is crazy. There's my diatribe. See, Dan, you were waiting for it, weren't you?
Do we want to speak to that?
I don't have an answer to that, but I appreciate the feedback, and you know, that's the kind of information we need to have available to us. The KEEP is an assessment that's not tied to accountability, right? And so it is an assessment that Teaching and Learning is using as they try to garner more funding for K-3 literacy. In the legislation right now, there's some efforts to, there's a grant program that provides preschool funding, and there's a bill currently, and I don't remember the number of it, that's written in that those programs that provide this grant-funded preschool would use, we'd have to develop an assessment, a preschool entry test. We would use the KEEP, beginning of school entry test, to try to measure growth and see whether these preschool programs are able to bring about the results that are promised through preschool. And if they are, which we expect preschool education is very effective, then that data would be used to try to get more funding as evidence that it's effective programs. So it's a good question, Kurt. Not really a question, but it's a good statement, and I appreciate you, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. And I saw lots of nods, so it sounds like that's a common feeling. One of the, as I sat there listening, I wondered, one of the possible solutions would be if there's some way that the proctoring could change. Is that part, was that laced into your comment? None. Yeah. Yeah. And again, it sounds like if the proctoring requirements could be changed, that would help provide some resolution. So that's something we can look at and see what issues would be impacted from a data standpoint if the proctoring changes. How about we talk about that, and then we'll get back with assessment directors sometime this spring. Son? Yeah. I think the intention is for the KEEP to continue. So there's been an investment on the state board side too to develop the test. We've consulted with the Center for Assessment to help us to ensure that the test has some validity and reliability in what we want it to provide for us. So my impression is that the plan is for that to go forward. There might be some things we could do though to address the LEAs and make that less impactful. So, yes.
You mentioned that it's not part of accountability, but will it be reported anywhere? You know how the old report cards had a place for kindergarten, but there was will it be reported as part of the school report cards?
It's coming on up. A few things. Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate that. So the question about the report. So the data is reported to the state. It's in board rule, the certain dates by September 15th and then by, September 30th and June 15th. The data is reported to the state, but it is not used on the accountability report card. And as far as your question or your comment, I guess, thank you. I appreciate that and the feedback. Something we did consider as we were developing the KEEP assessment was administration and who's proctoring that assessment, and particularly at the beginning of the year when the students are first coming to kindergarten, being there with the teacher. And I understand your concern with costs as well. It hasn't, so using this assessment is new, but administering a kindergarten assessment is not new. That's been around for years and years, that there's been an entry and an exit assessment in kindergarten. So it is legislated that kindergartners can have, or teachers, I guess, can have up to 12 days where the kindergarten students are not in school, but I appreciate your concern about the PR wanting to have kindergarten there. Right. So I know, I'm curious what you've done in the past with the assessments when you've administered assessments.
We've done different, of course.
Right.
Which we continue to do as well.
Sure.
Our assessments were shorter, and well, they were done by teachers, but it took a lot less time. Actually, it was a combined effort on that, but it was much shorter. It didn't take the days. We don't use 12 days in our district.
Right. Yeah. So the 12 days in the district. So the concern was that the assessment was too long, or that the assessments that you've used in kindergarten in the past may have been shorter. So thank you for that feedback. I appreciate that. I know we've tried really hard, and as Heather mentioned, we sent out that draft of the exit assessment so kindergarten teachers could be aware of what was coming up at the end of year. But we also have gone out since then and piloted items and have cut items from the assessment. So it's down to 13 items. We really are within, as we were piloting, we were right around 15 to 20-ish minutes in the middle of the year with kindergarten students. So we're assuming by the end of the year it should be right around that 20 minutes for a student, even a struggling student, with the addition of 2 small group questions. So there's also some small group administration that would be additional time, but we're assuming that could be done during the teacher's small group time with those individual students, that shouldn't take additional one-on-one time. But I appreciate your comment about proctors and who's being allowed to administer the assessment. I think that's something we'll take back to the literacy directors as well as to our KEEP development team and talk through how do we make sure that the students are still getting the instructional time with their teacher and not taking so much time for assessment, because we don't want that. So thank you. Also, to speak to some of the things that Sydney said, I feel like the team, especially with the KEEP exit, we've been very strategic about what is a good sampling of the overall kindergarten items and curriculum, what's going to be a good representation of the entire kindergarten core, and what to cut and what we don't need. So know that process of coming up with the best items to have and the ones that would correlate nicely with the entrance to be able to show a pattern of growth has been very strategic. So where we were able to cut, we have. And also to speak to the teacher assessment, at this point, the mindset has been that if we put the students with someone they don't know as well, it would impact the reliability of the assessment with students that are so small and where a trust relationship is so important. So that's been sort of the mindset and the mentality behind why we've chosen to have the teacher do it at this time, because we felt that if it was someone else giving the assessment the student was as comfortable with, it would impact the validity of the assessment. So taking this feedback, we can go back to the team and look at how we can continue to improve the process. If you have more questions, please contact me and Sid, and Kim's got them. And that's something we can speak to. We can go back and talk with the KEEP team and see if that's something that we can work with, is having the assistants in the room that have been there all year have access to give the assessment. We'll see if that's something we can look at with the KEEP team. Okay. Thank you. Now Emily.
Thank you. So a couple of weeks ago, we sent out a survey in the 80 memo. If you haven't had a chance to fill it out, it would be really helpful if you did. It's 3 questions: your district, your SIS system, and your UTREX contact, which will help me when you contact me to resolve your problems faster and start to correlate common problems that I'm seeing if they happen to result with SIS systems. It's fast. Please fill it out. We have stage time on test data available for you if you would like it. If you want to send me an email, it's gonna come back. I'll send it to you. It'll be broken down by school and test. And then we'll have your mean, min, max, and standard deviation for the time that last year's grades spent on the test. But when you're using that data, please just try and use it to plan the amount of time that you're going to allot for the kids in the computer labs or in the school day. And remember that the ELA times are combined with writing and reading. So those look large, but it's both tests combined into one. It's not a recommendation at all on how much time to spend. It's really just a calculation from last year. And then don't try and correlate it with anything. There's not enough data that we have to put out any of that kind of information. So, and then DLM rosters. This year is the first year that we are allowing DLM users to make modifications to your rosters, but you have to have the district test coordinator or district user role in order to do it. If you don't have that role and you make a change, when I do an upload, it's going to override whatever was changed. You can do it manually. In the DLM data management, page 103 has the link so that you can get right down to it and figure out how to do it. Yep. So a little bit more on that. When you're adding a new user, you need to make sure that you're including the Cactus ID as the educator identifier. That's what's going to link what's coming in through UTREX. Well, it's actually going to override what's coming into UTREX to keep that roster changed. And then make sure that you keep an email address, because that's how your teacher's going to log in. And that you select the roles that you want that person to have. In your roster name, how it's formatted is really important. And if it's not done right, when I upload my next load, it's going to override everything that you just did. So we need to make sure that you put in the teacher's last name with a space, and then your organization code, space, and subject. And if you don't know your organization code in DLM or in KITE, under organization, you can search for it and it'll pull it up. It's usually your district number and your school number. The leading zeros on district numbers got dropped, so just double check. And then leave your course blank and select your subject. And then once you get into your roster, you can select the educator that it is that you want to take over that class, and then the students that you need, and save, and it will all be there. And then to modify it, a lot of kids are coming in through their gen eds, and so you can modify those rosters in KITE. Make sure, again, you change that last name to the new teacher's name. Select the educator that you're changing it to. last names have to match. Otherwise, it's going to throw it out when I do my load. Select the students that need to go into that teacher's roster, save, and you should be good to go. If you have any questions, contact myself or Tracy, and we'll help you out.
This is just a quick reminder that it's that time of the year again. If you haven't done your training for test administration, you need to make sure that your schools are doing that. And please make sure that they do an in-depth review of the test administration manual. It's a little disconcerting when we have people say, what's a TAM? So make sure they know the acronym as well as what the purpose of it is. We have updated the script a little bit so it doesn't sound quite so wah, 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 wah. And so we're hoping that teachers will remember that they're supposed to read it before they administer and as they end every test. Don't forget that you need to remind whoever's doing the tests, the training, that they need to keep a signed roll of the people who are doing this for all the proctors who receive the training. And don't forget your special ed teachers. If it's computer lab aides, it's anybody who is going to have any access to SAGE needs to go through the training. And I put the link to the TAM in the what am I talking about? The PowerPoint this morning, okay? Also, just a quick reminder, we are going to be doing some assessment observations in the spring, and we are going to contact the districts and or the charters directly so that you are aware of when we're coming and who that is. And Jared and I and Tracy will be out again to just do some quick assessment. Remember, this is non-evaluative. It's really just to help us, especially as we move to a new vendor, to answer a lot of questions. We gained a lot of knowledge last year, and we really appreciate the welcome we received from every single school. It was a really empowering and learning experience for all of us. A quick reminder, this has been in the AD member, what we want to remind anybody who has Mac OS 1013 that you need to make sure that you have Mac 1013, because if you don't, it will cause your computers to crash. You'll have to contact, if you're using that browser, you need to contact the SAGE Help Desk. They will give you a link. You can also call them if you need to. And they will give you a link that will let you to permit downloading them machine by machine, or you can even do it en masse, so you don't have to, you can do it from one computer. A couple things that we've discovered as we've been out on our writing. We want to give a quick reminder about the SAGE benchmark modules. This is specific to all of the modules, but particularly writing. And that is a reminder that the benchmarks, although teachers can see the responses and can review them afterwards, they are still secure items, and that teachers should not be copying them, printing them, publishing them, copying them into Utah Compose, all the prompts, or into Google Docs. We've requested, I just received a report yesterday from Measurement Incorporated with the list of all the prompts that have been added, and Heather and Megan and I will be reviewing those quite closely. We will be fine. We are looking. And one of the things that makes us really sad is as we've been out doing our writing workshops, it's pretty much the entire state's doing this, okay? This is not isolated to one district or one charter. And they are copyrighted. This is violating testing ethics. You just might want to get it. And I've been asked this question, or Megan has, or Heather has, or Tracy has, or Whitney has at every single site we've gone in the 9 sessions of writing workshops we've been to. In fact, some teachers have come up and were like, don't tell us what you're doing. You're just not supposed to. And so you might want to send that message out that this is absolutely wrong, okay? Just a quick reminder, we wanted to give you some use cases. Did we do handouts on this, Jared, or did we, since we updated it? Okay. First, this is a quick reminder. This is for this year, okay, for the 2018 administration, because some of this stuff may change with our new vendor. But we wanted to let you know the purpose and the use cases. The biggest thing we wanted to point out for is the benchmark modules are really designed to be used as pre and post assessment. And it's a great way to look and have teachers evaluate standard to reporting category items
and some PLCs are using it to target instruction. Remember, once again, even though teachers can see the responses, they're not supposed to be publishing it. Remember, if teachers are showing questions, they have to mask any student privacy, any data. Because I've had lots of teachers say, well, can't I just put the writing response up on the thing? And I'm like, if you can see a name, you can't do it. So whether you like it, that's really how it works. Interim data, pretty much, we're just about through with interim. Remember, the interim test will not be available after March 9th. And on March 9th, if there are any open, it is like a forced quit. So there's a forced submission. Some teachers were surprised about that. The benchmarks will come back online on March 20th along with the spring summative test. So if teachers are frantic about that, they can. And then, of course, the summative tests, we know we're using those for accountability. Any questions about that? Somehow the secure factor of SAGE benchmarks, I think it got confused with SAGE formative a little bit. So teachers, and by the way, we don't think they're doing this maliciously. They just really want data to kind of compare programs, and they're not really designed to do that. Quick, we're going to do a really in-depth discussion with you about all the stuff we've learned this year from our writing workshops, but we just wanted to let you know that we have already presented the second session of our writing workshops at 9 locations. Our final site will be February 28th in Vernal. We've presented to about 360 teachers. For the second session, because we gave teachers an assignment, we had about 232 teachers drop out. And so it was kind of sad, especially because we gave them a free book, and so which we already ordered. But the nice thing about it is for those teachers who are there, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. And we're really anxious to hear from you if you see a marked improvement in some writing instruction in your districts as well. We've given them lots of surveys. We've done we've asked them a lot of things. And at the AD meeting on March 15th, we're going to present all the stuff we learned so that you guys can take it back and share it with everyone. Our biggest concern is we really want the information sent to the teachers, because the more you work with them, the more you find out there's just a lot of misconceptions out there. I'm still answering emails every single day about how many writing prompts there are, who gets them, what grade levels. It's kind of crazy. And so anything you can do to help with that would be really, really useful. And then I don't know who's doing self-read. It must be Man Michelle. And if you have any questions, make sure you just email us, because we're here.
Okay. So, yeah, please. Yeah. So last time I introduced the self-reported indicators. You're going to see the same handout that you saw last time. On the back side is the list of proposed self-reported indicators that schools can upload to their school report card. This is an opportunity for schools to display their own data, things that are meaningful and valuable for them. I'd like to take 10 or 15 minutes to get your input. Maybe some of you have taken this back to your district and have been able to have conversations around it and various things. But looking at the list, make sure you're not looking at the ABCD side, but the other side with the long list. You'll see the high-level categories or domains of influence that we have in schools. Here's an example of school-level factors. An example of like an implementation activity or an evidence-based practice. And then the outcome measure or fidelity measure or process measure, some sort of data that can be collected. From my perspective, I think we want to leave a lot of room for LEAs, for schools to choose what they want to report on and not be too specific, but really guide people's thinking through this process to evaluate their own practices and see if what they're doing is working. And this is a great opportunity for them to think through that process. So this is kind of our primary forum to collect information on what's missing here, what you think should be here, what you think could potentially be here. So I'm going to ask you to kind of group up in groups of 4 or 5. So so these, not everybody needs one of these worksheets. This is what I'd like to collect, maybe one from each group. And I can run upstairs and get some more. But have just have a conversation. Thank you. And on what you think should be here, and I'm open to any feedback you have and your ideas. And yeah. Thank you, Shar. Thank you. And Shar's going to bring a few more copies, but for now I'll give groups one to fill out. So go ahead and just kind of find some folks around you and have a conversation, maybe groups of 3 or 4. All right. Thank you so much. So I'm going to kind of pull you back together, and there are folks online would really like to hear kind of a high level of what was discussed and what was covered. So I'd like to ask for some volunteers to share what you talked about, some ideas that you generated. Okay, I'm going to start calling on people. Okay, you guys talk about keys. Okay.
We had a couple of questions. How will the school or district update the self-reported indicators? And will there be a filter for the LEA to check if it's reported directly to the state? Should there be a connection between the reporting of the school improvement plan selected factors and self-reported factors? And then we observed that on student factors, in the case of AP, there probably ought to be some standardization so that you don't just have a total number, but you can make some comparisons, numbers enrolled and numbers of success. Teacher factors, we noticed that it's not addressing any longer, although there's been discussion in the past, of teacher attendance and teacher retention.
Excellent points. Thank you. Yeah, I like all of those ideas. Thank you. Can I ask you folks to share what you talked about?
I just felt the wheels on the bus go. Yeah. So we were talking about the equitable opportunity factors, and that bottom one, we feel like we need to add another one that it was increasing access to college level courses, but we're thinking about increasing access for underserved populations that perhaps even, a special ed student who might move out of special ed. But over here it says number of concurrent enrollment credits. We just thought that perhaps that needed to look at subgroup changes in performance with students of color, students with disabilities, more than just some EL stuff here. So whether it's another category or you just broaden that definition a little bit.
Yes, thank you. Any other thoughts to share? And there was a lot of discussion online. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your ideas. This is all really important for me and us as we sort of create this list to present to the board. And what's relevant to you is what's really important. So thank you.
Okay, I think that brings this part of our scheduled meeting to an end at 10:15, and we're scheduled to start at 10:30 with Scott. So those of you who'd like to stick around and learn more about measuring growth from some of your local assessments and maybe answer some of the questions that came up online. Kim, can you still access those questions that came up online during the time Scott was talking earlier? So maybe we can address those as well at that time. But I thank you for your time. We'll follow up and get the next time we meet, we'll talk a little bit more about KEEP and the questions that came from Cash. Also, I had a question about UPass funding brought up during my time in this meeting, and I will follow up with that and report back to you guys on the status of the UPass money that last year was reallocated, if I understand correctly, to help pay for the Aspire system. And I'm guessing that's the Student Information Aspire, not ACT Aspire, since we didn't go with that then. Anyway, are there any other questions before we conclude our time together? Online? Okay, yeah, if you can leave your sheets on the table, or do you want to put them on the back table? Or bring them down, Michelle, any of those. So thank you very much. I don't know if it's still snowing outside, but if it is, be cautious driving back. Thank you.